Hey, and welcome back to Acting is Reacting with me, JSB. Now, earlier today, I posted my first slightly belated gig review for Magnum. And right now, I'm going to get into my second slightly belated gig review as I move into February and talk far too much about the most recent London gig of Toto. But that's as much as you'll see of the logo. Sorry about that. You're stuck with my face, I'm afraid. Anyway, a lot has happened in the world of Toto since their last proper UK tour back in 2018. Of course, co-founder and main writer David Paich has retired from the road for the second time, as has fellow keyboardist Steve Porcaro. And they've been through a few rejig lineups since, not to mention being subjected to lawsuits from the late Jeff Porcaro's widow, which has cost them dearly in more ways than one. On the other side of the spreadsheet, Africa, despite never really going away, is somehow bigger than ever and has led to a new generation finding the band, to the point that for the first time ever they were doing arena dates in the UK, with a configuration that was slightly reduced, so at Wembley it wasn't at its full 12,500 capacity, but I would say they had easily 8 to 10,000 fans in attendance, and it looked and felt full, so not shabby at all. Now, that long overdue success is unfortunately tied in with yacht rock, the fake genre that's become surprisingly popular with all sorts of people. And in some ways, the band played up to that, but for the most part, they remained true to themselves and their long term loyal fans, hello, by playing the usual, mostly pretty rocked up set. Nice. Now, before I get to that, I will touch briefly on one of their concessions to the world of yacht rock, which was their support act, Christopher Cross, who was basically as quintessentially yachty as they come. So I'd never seen Christopher Cross before, and I quite enjoy, a best of from him is pretty much what I need, along with the debut probably. So it was a nice bonus. He had a superb band on hand and ran through all but one of his early 80s hits. He left out his weakest, in my opinion, Say You'll Be Mine, and filled the slot with a couple of the deeper cuts from that debut, which were much better tunes, like The Light Is On, and especially I Really Don't Know Anymore, which I really don't know why that wasn't a single. I think it's the second best song on that pretty solid debut album. Otherwise, it was everything you'd expect. Sailing, Arthur's Theme, Think of Laura, and of course, Ride Like the Wind, which closed his set. He's 73, so I forgive him that his vocals were a little bit on the thin side, but they were decent, and his backup singers, and did I mention superb band, basically covered any cracks in the vocal department, and it was a pretty enjoyable 45-minute opening set. Not enough to make me ever really desire to see him as a headliner, but pleasant to have encountered, and I'm glad to have seen him. The only real downside was, as is becoming an increasing bugbear of mine of late, nobody really announces stage times anymore. So at 7:30, the arena just went into darkness and they were on stage and playing, which meant that you had loads of people struggling to find their seats in the dark for his first two songs. Moving swiftly on to the main event, which was Toto, who, in their current configuration, are made up of course, Steve Lukather on guitar and vocals, my namesake, Joseph Williams, on lead vocals. John Pierce is now in the band on bass. You've got Warren Ham as their kind of utility ace on percussion and sax and vocals and all kinds of things. You've also got returning to the band after previous tenures, Greg Fillinganes back on keyboards and Shannon Forrest on drums, both of whom, well, they do their jobs more than convincingly. Now, you've also got a new second keyboardist and additional vocalist in the form of a chap called Dennis Atlas, and I'll be talking about him in gushing terms a little bit later. So they came straight out of the blocks with Child's Anthem, the instrumental cut that opened their debut way back in '78, and one of four tracks in the night that I would be hearing live for the very first time. So this was immediately followed by my first proper shock of the night in the form of Carmen, the opening cut from my favourite Toto album of all time, 1984's isolation. Now, back in the 80s, Joseph had to sing Fergie's high parts, and it basically killed his vocal cords on uh, the Seventh One tour. But this time round, he was taking David Page's vocal leads, and young Dennis Atlas was covering Fergie's parts and doing them superbly well. Indeed, Steve Lukather made a comment afterwards along the lines of, "If you know our history, you know how crazy this is," and he wasn't joking. So where can you go from there but to another girl name song that opened an album, in this case, one of the biggest hits, and the song that made me a fan in the first place, Rosanna. Uh, Now that got most of us who were on the floor on our feet, and we more or less stayed on them for most of the night from there, which is how it should be. Now, I know some people like a good seat at a concert, but for me, a seat is what you sit in until the band come on, and then you get up. That's the best of both worlds, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, from there on, it was a mix of hits, and Toto had more hits than most people realise. Not always their best songs, but hey, hits nonetheless. And they played a good mix of those with some fan servicing deep cuts, including another big surprise for me, Minefields from their 1999 reunion album with Bobby Kimball, which had never been performed live before this tour, and had Joe, Greg, and Dennis sharing the vocals on that one. We got another amazing isolation era cut, Angel Don't Cry, with Joe sounding great and Dennis again wowing everybody with his spot on Fergie Frederiksen vocals. Just incredible to have someone in the band who can really match up to what Fergie delivered on that album. Insane. Now, they slowed things down a few times for some mostly Luke sung ballads, the highlight being I Will Remember from 1995's Tamboo album, which may well have ended with Luke's best solo of the night, though don't quote me on that. Now, having Joe, Greg, Dennis, and Warren Ham in the band has, I think, inspired Luke to really up his game vocally, and he sounded as good as I've ever heard him. So that's five great vocalists in one band. Um, I mean, they've always been top notch musically and pretty damn good vocally, but this was another level compared to anything I've seen. And I'll talk about how long I've been seeing this band a little bit later on. Both Greg and Dennis did have solo keyboard spots along the way, and Shannon also got a drum solo in. Those were probably the lowlights of the night, but they didn't overstay their welcome. And what they did do, though, was kind of kill a bit of momentum, and it led to people sitting down, and that meant that the tracks like Angel Don't Cry and White Sister, we were sat down before getting on our feet for the next big one to come up. Um, a minor quibble, and the solo spots were actually fun, but yeah, some people don't go for that sort of thing. But as I say, they didn't overdo things. And can I just say about Shannon Forrest? Um, again, obviously, we haven't got Jeff Porcaro in the world anymore. Um, but damn, Shannon comes as close as you can imagine to getting that feel. And I mean, his drum sound was just huge, especially on some of the slower tracks, like I Won't Hold You Back when he comes in. Ooh, ooh, oh, it was hitting you in the gut. Beautiful. So I mentioned I've got history with this band. They were for a long time my number one band of all time. They slipped way down to maybe number three now, but still, yeah. And I got into them as a young teen in the early to mid 90s. And I've been seeing them live since 2003 in various configurations. Initially, in that first period where David Page wasn't in the touring lineup and Greg came in for the first time, and then three times in the 2010s when Page and Steve Porcaro both came back, and that was incredible. So, where does this current lineup stand? Well, for me, this was unquestionably the best I've seen them without Page in the lineup. And I'm increasingly of the view that it might be the best I've seen them ever. Now, certainly from a vocal perspective, that's undeniable, but even in terms of just overall musicianship and energy, this was hard to beat. Looking back at it from the perspective of a month, I'm still struggling not to label this my favourite of all Toto gigs, so I think it might actually be. Whether it's true or not, definitely 5-star performance. And again, those who are down under or anywhere else where they've got upcoming dates this year, for goodness sake, if you can go see them, go see them. That's really the best review I can give. Any doubts that this was a legitimate Toto lineup? Absolutely. It's Toto, it's real. Do not miss them. And please God, it doesn't have to be under the Toto name if that's difficult, but this lineup needs to record. Luke mentioned that they've all played on a solo album from Dennis Atlas, so look out for that. But yeah, we need new music from this lineup. It's too good to waste on just doing the old favourites. Anyway, that's my Toto review. Hope you enjoyed, and of course, again, if you missed my Nothing But Toto live stream from before this gig, well, that's still up on YouTube in 2 parts for all time, so check that out afterwards. Or check out the Magnum review that I've just put up mere hours before this one. So I will just say, as ever, thanks for watching today, and bye for now, but I hope not for long.
Acting is reacting. This does not mean acting again.